Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. In order for practical Tawhid, which is the key to a proper Islamic lifestyle, in order for it to be ingested, digested, properly incorporated within one's heart, here there are 2 or 3 prerequisites that are necessary. One of them is that the animal dimension to the human being must be tamed. The more animalistic one is, the slower Tawheed can be, not academically accepted, but the slower Tawheed would be incorporated by the heart. Because the heart is that of an animal, and animals have only to some extent, they can ingest Tawheed. Not that they can't, otherwise animals too, they have perception, they have aql, they also grow, they have a relationship with Allah, they have free will, it's not all by instinct. And so the common controversy amongst the theologians and the urafa into what is it that differentiates humans from animals, it's not only thinking, otherwise animals think too. You just look at any particular animal kingdom, like that of the bee, for example. There's a queen bee, and then the queen bee has a number of guards. Look at the order of it. And then those guards have to flap their wings, if flap is the right word. They have to flap their wings at a specific rate. And if they transgress that rate, other bees would come and kill them. See, these are in the animal kingdom. When you analyze it in its particularity, you see all this, there's an order here. It's not all by instinct, there's free will. And they have perception, they do things, they think. There's rationality to some extent in their actions. And so it's not thinking per se which differentiates. Otherwise, look at all the different animals, the things that they do. There's definitely some rationality there. To put everything under the umbrella of instinct, that's not correct, according to the urafa. Allama Tabatawi has spoken about this in Al-Mizan. However, that which does differentiate, and Allama Tabatawi in another of his works has mentioned this, is idrakul fikriy tam. It's that complete degree of perception. Yes, perception has degrees. Thinking is only one degree of perceiving. But having visions, seeing Allah, seeing the metaphysical, the immaterial degrees of perception, that too, these are perceptions. This man has the potential. And if man doesn't enter this realm of perceiving, they would die as an animal. That doesn't mean they will go to hell. But even in heaven, their status is that of an animal. And like an animal who lives in a stable with materialistic pleasures, in heaven they will be given their heavenly stable with the pleasures that a stable has for animals. So this is a true human. And Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagh has made references to this, and even in the Quran we can see this logic. So in order to incorporate Tawheed, one of the prerequisites is that the animal dimension has to be tamed. Another is that this Tawheed, this practical Tawheed, one has to constantly recall it, and that can be recalled in different manners and forms. And by constantly recalling it with that soul which has tamed its animal dimension, slowly and gradually that practical Tawheed will be incorporated. Now, in relation to the animal dimension being tamed, here the Sharia has come with so many do's and don'ts, with a very lengthy protocol of do's and don'ts, the underlying rationale of which is to tame the animal dimension. In some cases, the underlying rationale of these do's and don'ts is to enhance one's practical Tawheed also. Now I want to go through the nutritional appetite and how the nutritional appetite and the do's and don'ts of how to eat that the Sharia brings, how it tames the animal dimension, and in some cases how it even enhances your Tawheed. And then the issue is this, that what we do 2 or 3 times a day should be a groundwork to harvesting one's Tawheed. See, this is the practical way of growing. Some people look for magic formulae and think with that in a day everything will be solved. But the key is the Sharia, understanding the do's and don'ts of the Sharia, and then slowly growing day by day through eating, through sleeping and other appetites and everything in the Sharia. When you look at the Sharia, all the prescriptions, the Sharia prescriptions of wajibat and the muharramat, it's all to tame the animal dimension, or it's to tame the I, eliminate the ego, or it's to enrich practical Tawheed directly within you. And it's only when you practice the Sharia, knowing what the Sharia is based upon, not just doing the Sharia for the sake of the Sharia. See, sometimes we do the do's and don'ts, but we don't know why we're doing it. So without that awareness, it won't benefit you. Ayatollah Hassan Zada has said that ma'rifah, or the Sharia without ma'rifah, it's like a lifeless soul. Although I'm paraphrasing. He said a community that has no ma'rifah, a community without ma'rifah, without irfan, is like a lifeless body. There's no growth. They may do all the external aspects of the Sharia, but when there's no awareness of why they're doing it, how it's supposed to benefit you, it's going to be limited, their growth. It's only when we know why we're doing things, and that's the spirit of the law, and then you grow whilst you're doing it. So here I want to focus on the do's and don'ts of consuming, eating, and diet in Islam. All prophets would eat, although there is one exception to Prophet Idris, who there are some traditions that narrate that he didn't consume for, I think it was 16 years. There is something which has just come to my mind. But yes, Prophet Idris, he's the same as Prophet Ilyas. They're the same person. And after his occultation, when he came back to the people, and he was a messenger after that, he was given the title of Ilyas. But it's the same person, according to many scholars. Yes, there was a particular protocol, a particular reasoning for Idris alayhi salam to do and not eat for 16 years, and one has to study the environment at that time, because the prescriptions that prophets would do were based upon the given time and the geography of the land where they wanted to preach. And so because of that variation in time and place and people, you would see a difference of sharias. There's no difference in Tawhid, there's no difference in Ma'ad, there's no difference in prophethood, the ideas behind these, Usul al-Din. However, when it came to the particularities of the Sharia, that would change. They were all manifestations of pure Tawheed, but there was still a difference because of time and place and geography. And sometimes we had religions at the same time, two Islams at the same time. One in one part of the world, the other in another part of the world. One was called the Ibrahimi faith, the other was called Judaism or Christianity. That line of religion which continued from Ismail alayhi salam was the Hanif religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. That which continued through Ishaq, Isaac alayhi salam, they were Christianity, Judaism. And the undistorted Judaism, that's Islam. The undistorted Christianity, that's Islam. Today it may be distorted, but anyway, it was pure Islam then. But the point was we had different manifestations of Islam at the same time in different parts of the world. Yes, so that 16 years, that's an exception. But all prophets would eat. It's something essential for survival, and it was something that they would tell people that people have to eat. But animals eat too. Humans eat. Prophets brought a protocol of how to eat. So we don't eat just like animals. And also, in the Quran, wherever the imperative of kulu, the order of to eat, was given, it was always given, the order was always followed with an action. So we don't eat for the sake of eating. We eat to pray, or we eat to recall Allah. We eat to express gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We eat to work, a halal living. But eating for the sake of eating, that's something problematic. And that's why it's so spiritually problematic that when you're satiated, or even almost satiated, that's why it's problematic to eat. When there's no reason behind your eating, save for the food. Now, it may be good food, luxurious food, but that's not a reason to eat it. There's always a reasoning behind eating, because eating is supposed to be a conduit to getting closer to Allah. It's an action. And if that's lost, you've entered the animal kingdom. That should never be lost. Now, the importance and significance of this discussion is in this, that since there's a unity between body and soul, what you eat has an effect on your soul. And therefore spiritual elevation or depression can arise depending on how you eat, because of that unity between body and soul. Yes, it's something physical and you're consuming with the physical body, but because of that unity between body and soul, it will have effects on the soul. It's like sometimes when someone is traumatized physically in whatever way, excuse me, when someone is traumatized physically, no matter what, in what manner that arises, why does it have an effect on one's mind and one's immaterial aspect? It's an effect on the soul. It can even have an effect on in your dreams. In your dreams, there's nothing material in your dreams. Your dreams is a product of the soul. It's an immaterial dimension of you. But something which happened in the physical realm, it even has an effect. Or it makes you happy, what you eat or what happens to you physically. Sometimes it makes you sad. There's a relationship here. You can't segregate them. Although also sometimes you become very disappointed because of an event that can have physical effects. These psychosomatic illnesses in psychiatry, it's based on this. It's based on this unity between body and soul. So eating, it's a physical endeavor, but yes, it has spiritual consequences. Okay, so I want to discuss, first of all, what kind of food, and why Islam has prescribed certain foods and deemed them as halal, permissible to consume, and certain foods as haram, impermissible and forbidden to consume. We see that there are certain animals that we're not allowed to consume, like all predators, or dogs, pigs, and predators and other different classifications of animals. Why does Islam find them problematic? Whereas with cattle, it's unproblematic. With camel, with sheep, cows. What's the reasoning? What's the rationale? What are the wisdoms behind this? In Islam, based on traditions from the Ahlul Bayt, we believe in the principle of you are what you eat. So if you were to consume the meat of pigs or dogs, you will become pig-like, and you will incorporate dog-like attributes within you. And that's why Islam wants you to be human. Those negative attributes of the pig, of the dog, they may have positive attributes too, but the negative attributes of these animals are significant. They're harmful. Yes, in relation to their positive attributes, we have a lot of prescriptions from the Imams telling us to learn from the dog. But which attribute of the dog? Yes, it's good to study animals and try to discover their good attributes and then incorporate those good attributes. That's okay. So you can study the dog and learn what its bad attributes are and its good attributes are academically, and then incorporate the good attributes. And we have prescriptions from the Imams. However, when you're eating them, you're going to acquire their negative attributes. And that may be problematic. You may acquire their positive attributes too, but acquiring their negative attributes, that's where Islam says this is dangerous. In relation to their good attributes, do it academically. There's no need to eat it to acquire their good attributes. But eat it, refrain from eating it, so you refrain from incorporating dog attributes. Refrain from incorporating attributes of the pig. And this is why predators are haram, because then you will acquire predator attributes. You may acquire good attributes of the predator too, it's possible. But Islam says this acquiring the negative attributes, it's much more problematic. The harm is much more than the benefit that you may acquire from consuming, let's say, the flesh of tigers. It may have good attributes too, but the harm of its negative attribute is much more. And it's detrimental in your journey in becoming a true human being. So predators are haram. You are what you eat. Now, some people may find that problematic, but even rationally, this can be easily proved. And why do we want our children not to become intimate with vicious people, even though there's no touch between them? Because the vicious attributes, even though there's no touch, but the vicious attributes will be conveyed to the children if they become intimate. Merely socializing or speaking, no. But when an affinity is built between that vicious person and one becomes intimate with them, yes, the negative attributes will convey to the child. That's the main reason we don't want our children to mingle or intermingle with such people. Now here, with dogs and pigs and whatever animal, you're consuming the flesh. You're actually consuming it now. So it's even a fortiori that this problem will arise, even more so. In relation to even having pets, here in Islam, with most animals, it's not an issue. It's okay to purchase animals and treat them as pets. But even there, if you build an affinity with the animal, if the affinity is built with an intimate relationship or an affinity in any other way, then that can lead you to acquire the negative attributes of that animal. Even though according to the Sharia it's permissible, according to the Tariqah it may be spiritually problematic. Because, for example, the cat or the hamster or the parrot or whatever animal, you will be incorporating its negative attributes if you become intimate with it. You know, build an affinity, a closeness, a kind of dependency upon it. Then its negative attributes will be incorporated. So I'm not saying no one has any pets, but at least you have to know where the boundaries are, spiritually speaking. And here there are many stories that we see that the sages of old have given, and based on these Islamic principles. But these stories, they may be true, they may be just for our benefit, but there's one very famous one where the king's daughter wouldn't marry, and the king thought she had a problem, so all the best doctors of the land would come from abroad, and so on and so forth, but no one could find what the problem with her not wanting to marry was, because they couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. And then a hakim, a wise one, entered the city one day, and then the ministers of the king told the king that this hakim has entered, maybe he will be able to help. The king ordered them to bring the hakim. The hakim came, and his first question was, take me to the residence, because he'd known that the best doctors had come and couldn't diagnose the illness of, or the problem of the princess. So he said this has to be something environmental. So he said, let's go to where the princess is residing. And he went and he saw many cats there. And he said, okay, take me back to the king, I know what the problem is. And he went to the king and he said, you have to replace the cats with pigeons for a period of time, and then you can take the pigeons away too. And this was the reasoning. Because one of the negative attributes of cats, and if you study the cat attributes, you see that they have a very violent sex life. This appetite of theirs, it's a very violent one. Now, this princess was living with cats, and she would see this, and this would be incorporated within her. So much so that she would be scared, that in her fear to even marry. But with pigeons, they have a very long foreplay even, and it's very smooth. And then the Hakim said, replace it with pigeons, so that she sees this, and for this to be incorporated. And that's what they did, and this inner fear was removed, and she got married. But the point was, whether the story was true or not, it's based on these principles, that when you acquire this affinity with animals, it's problematic. And there are some countries that the statistics reveal that 8 million reptiles are kept as pets. Now, reptiles like snakes and other forms of reptiles. But this has an effect on the soul. I mean, even having dogs as pets will have an effect. A man or woman who is single and has been living with a dog for X years, and then they want to get married, the partner, this has to be an issue for them. It's not very wise to get married immediately. Certain things have to be sorted. And even having a reptile as a pet too, these things are problematic. This can be very difficult. Especially, and I emphasize on this, especially, only if that affinity is built. If there's no affinity, compassion to animals, even to a pig, is good. Compassion is different to building an affinity to something. Compassion to creation, including animals, including the dog and pig, when you see them in the zoo or on the street, when you see the dog, stroking them, having compassion for them, there's nothing wrong there. But it's that affinity which has spiritual repercussions. That's problematic. And that's what the Urafa want people to, at least be aware of. Some countries eat insects, spiders, beetles. These insects and spiders and other forms of insects that they eat, this is going to be problematic, because those insects have certain attributes, and consuming the actual insect, you may acquire those attributes. Now, you study the life of a beetle, for example, or a centipede, or different insects, see what their negative attributes are, then study the norms and behavioral norms of those countries who consume these readily. And patterns will be seen here. And therefore Islam wants a human to be nurtured, not an animal. A human. And therefore it's coming with all these protocols. No one is saying an animal is bad, that you can't consume it. But in your nurturing, you can't just eat anything that you feel like. So then the question is, so why can't we consume cows, sheep, camel? And that's because they don't have harmful attributes. Their attributes are benign, they're not harmful. But the attributes of those animals, they're, significantly vicious and harmful. But with cows and sheep, they're not. But if you overdo it, even with cattle, if you overdo it, even there, you will acquire attributes of the cow, yes, without a doubt. You'll become lazy, sloppy, and so on and so forth. Two issues remain in relation to meat. One is, why should the meat be slaughtered, why should the animal be slaughtered in a given way? And in relation to meat consumption, and does Islam have any say on how much meat we should consume? In relation to the manner that Islam slaughters, let's say the cow, for example, or the sheep, or the camel, but with the camel the manner of slaughtering is slightly different. It's not a matter of just cutting the neck in a given way. But why should a human being actually go and cut the neck in a given order, in a given manner? Why can't we just, for example, just shoot it down and then use its meat? What's the rationale behind that? Now, there may be medical reasons, which I don't want to go through. We shouldn't commentate on Islamic truths, only limiting ourselves to the physical, medical realm. Once upon a time they would say pigs are haram, and a scientist would come with sincerity. They would do research, they would find X element in the pig which was cancerous, and then they would say, oh, Islam 1,400 years ago, they said they knew this, they said it was haram, and they think that's the reason. And then many years later, then they find the same element in cows. And what are you going to say there? The truths behind the Sharia, it's primarily spiritual truths. And the answer and the rationale that has to be sought in the spiritual realm. We shouldn't keep on going in and looking for medical or physical answers. But that's not a bad thing to do, but appreciate that science is limited. And you can't find a scientific answer which can hold the test of time. Years later, something else may be proven, which may go against what you tried to prove, but then when you proved it, you linked it to Islam. And then when it's disproved again, what are they going to say? Why should Yes, someone actually do the cutting. Why should they do the cutting themselves? Here, one of the prerequisites for the slaughterer, and it's better for someone to do the slaughtering themselves when they want to consume meat in their house, for them to go and slaughter the animal. And there are wisdoms behind that. I'll come to that when we come to the meat production, the mass production we see today. But why is that better than when someone actually goes and just shoots? Why can't we just shoot it down? Why should there be touch, skin-to-skin contact with the animal? One. And secondly, it should be done by a person, according to the Sharia, who's a Muslim. Now, there may be one or two religious authorities who say it can be a Christian or a Jew. But even if we accept that minority, the issue is they're all believers of Tawhid. A believer of Tawhid has to do the cutting. Why? Here, we have to introduce the concept of insha. Insha is a form of generating. In the creation of man, Allah uses the word that we generated him. We generated man, humans. This generating of human beings, in the Sharia we see it in different places. One of them is this: when you're generating something, when you're slaughtering, when a monotheist is slaughtering an animal, you're generating something into that meat. Just to give another example to make things to simplify things. When the mother is breastfeeding the child, the mother is executing insha and generating the child. And that's why it's mustahab for the mother to be in wudu, and that's why it's mustahab for the breastfeeding mother to have certain characteristics, because those characteristics, according to traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, these pass on to the child. So if they're courageous, the child will be courageous. We believe in spiritual genetics too. But the woman, when breastfeeding, they're generating. Be it a Muslim or a non-Muslim, but they're still generating. And that's why if a non-Muslim breastfeeds, it may cause problems for your child. Not from a Sharia perspective, but spiritually. And many stories of ulama have pointed to this fact. But the idea is you're doing insha, you're generating this child. You're nurturing it, you're building it. Now, in fiqh, when the marja is asked, when the religious authority is asked, if the milk is poured into a glass, and then from that glass, the child is fed, would that mother, let's say it's not the genetic mother, let's say it's another mother, it's another woman who is now breastfeeding, will they become a breastfeeding mother, a rida'i mother, as they call it in the Sharia? And the answer is no. They don't accept it. Why? Because that's not called true generating. Yes, it's generating in another way. They're growing with that milk. But they're not called a mother though. They won't be classified as a mother because a mother didn't generate it. For generation to happen, there has to be skin-to-skin contact. Without that, you may be generating, but you won't be creating motherhood. No mother is created. To be a mother or a father, there has to be contact. Now that, when there's contact with the mother through the breasts, it's a rida'i mother. The Sharia says yes, but it has to be done skin to skin. It has to be done with contact. With a glass of milk, no. Even if it's the mother's milk, she won't be deemed a mother. You see, kinship will not be developed, won't arise. And even for to be a genetic mother or a genetic father, a genetic mother, according to those who believe, the mother is the owner of the womb. Look, because in the womb, you're generating the child. The woman who is generating the child is a mother. With the breastfeeding mother, it's through milk, contact, skin-to-skin contact. With the genetic mother, it's the womb, because it's generating. What about the father? It's copulation, direct copulation in intercourse. With the mother, with the father, the role is much limited. But there has to be contact. So this raises an issue with IVF. IVF is like giving the milk through a glass, because here there's no contact in IVF. Fertilization is brought about in a test tube. If a man just gives sperm, he just gives sperm, he doesn't convey the sperm. There's no imna, that conveying of sperm from one place to another. Although this discussion is very long and it has Quranic premises that one can support oneself with. But anyway, if one just gives sperm but doesn't transfer the sperm directly through copulation, are they a father by just giving the sperm? A woman who just gives the egg, are they the mother by just giving the egg? Even if you assume the mother is the owner of the egg, but what if it's done through IVF? Are they still the mother? Here, everyone follows their own religious authority, but this is an important issue. And in test tube babies, even Ayatollah Sistani has given, he said it's problematic in his Minhaj al-Salihin if the father just gives the sperm. By just giving the sperm in IVF, he says it's problematic. He doesn't give a fatwa. It's ihtiyat wajib, that fatherhood, the genetic father, will not be deemed. You can't call them a father in the genetic sense. They will be fatherly. They will behave fatherly. Yes, IVF allows that. But science and IVF can't bring about a change in the cosmos and the order of things that nature has had. It's ingrained in the universe. Through copulation, one becomes a father, one becomes a mother. You can't just suddenly change the whole creative order of things by just a scientific procedure. Yes, the scientific procedure and all these infertility clinics, it's good. They allow someone to be fatherly. They can be fatherly towards a child, and that's very important. And there's a lot of reward in that too, assuming all the other prerequisites are met. And it's a very easy thing to do. But to say they're a father, that, according to religious authorities, yes, there's a difference of opinion. Most of the scholars say the father is the owner of the sperm, irrespective of whether it's done directly or through IVF. I mean, most religious authorities do say that. But there may be one or two, but that one or two, we have to see why. What's the problem? Why can IVF be a problem in determining fatherhood? So, yes, when the slaughterer is slaughtering, generation is happening. Barakah, blessings, is sent through the monotheism of the slaughterer to that meat. That meat is blessed. Why has the meat become blessed? It's blessed because of the monotheist blessed it. Why? Through Tawhid. And now that we can consume. But if we were to consume meat that hasn't been slaughtered, hasn't been blessed through monotheism, that's going to have reverse spiritual effects on us. In relation to mass production, today we see that animals are slaughtered in mass numbers. This wasn't supposed to be the case. I mean, in Islam isn't vegetarian, but it has a vegetarian dimension to it. It wants you to eat meat, but maybe once a day, once every 2 days, once every 3 days. have meat, but little. And that's why it's recommended to you slaughter your own. Because when you slaughter your own, you're forced, you're coerced in consuming less. Because you don't want to keep on slaughtering. Slaughtering too much also is, not recommended. It's even makruh. Because that cutting that you do, if you cut extensively and a lot excessively, that cutting that you do, that slaughtering that you do, that cutting attribute will be incorporated within you. Then you become a cutter. At the workplace, at university, with your neighbors, you may cut them. And that's why many professions are makruh, such as the slaughterer. The qassab, the qasba is the neck area, the throat region. The qassab is one who cuts the animal through the neck, and that's makruh, to have that, because to do it excessively is problematic. But when you do it, now and again, it's okay. But as a job, no. It's spiritually problematic, not problematic. It's not haram from the Sharia perspective. But anyway, meat production has gone out of control today. That diet, meat diet, which was, ideal in Islam, is have meat, but little. Don't overdo it. But today it's overdone and it's readily available, and this is problematic. For example, when you want to slaughter a chicken yourself, compare that when chickens are slaughtered in mass production. For example, you have a machine and it cuts the chicken's neck every 100 chickens at the same time, and let's say the person says Bismillah, inshallah, and most Maharaja accept it. They say Bismillah with every cutting which happens, then the next 100 come Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and then that's cut. And all the other prerequisites are met. Okay, but it's done with a Bismillah, and the Maharaja have accepted it. But let's look at the spirit of the law here. It's come out of that slaughterer doing it directly. The blessedness of the chicken, does it make a difference or not? See, these things, there are wisdoms behind the Sharia. With modernity, no one is saying modernity is bad, but with modernity, these wisdoms are now on the brink of extinction, because we're losing it. All the secrets are going. Even eating with one's hands. Some people want to prove that it's good medically. That's not an issue. Some people say it's not good because it's dirty physically. It's not very clean physically. That's another issue. Both are physical interpretations. But why it's good to eat with your hands? Here it goes back to why that cutting isn't very good. Or why in some traditions, like that profession is makruh, we have traditions why don't cut your bread and meat with a knife. Use your hands to take your morsel of meat or your piece of bread. Don't cut with a knife. And your meat and bread are common foods. It was common then, it's common now. When you cut these foods, that cutting attribute will become with the knife. That cutting attribute will become incorporated within you. Then you become a cutter. In the same way the qassab, it was makruh for that kind of profession when they cut every day. But when you consume meat with your hands, there's no cutting. It's very gentle. It's with your hands. But when utensils came into the picture, because of modernity and the knife, the fork, all these things, it's not bad. But it's taken away this secret of the Sharia. It's made it extinct. Although there are some communities in North Africa and maybe the Indian subcontinent and other places too, they still preserve this custom, and it's a good custom to do. But meat production anyway, this excessive production of meat, this is a side effect of modernity. It's not what Islam had intended, for animals to be, consumed in this way. Sometimes you may slaughter a lot of animals for wearing clothes, that's okay. But eating too much meat, that's not something which is advised in Islam. Okay. Then we come to the issue of simplicity in eating. Not to be too fussy or restrictive in your diets. Sometimes you have to be on a medical diet, that's okay. But otherwise, whatever is put on your plate, whatever is offered, consume it. Don't be too restrictive. كَانَ يَأْكُلُ كُلَّ الْأَصْنَافِ مِنَ الطَّعَامِ. The Holy Messenger, he would eat all kinds of foods. He would say, this kind of food, I won't eat at all. As I say, if it's a medical diet, it's okay. Or there may be other reasons. But all in all, especially when you go out, when food is put before you, the host puts food before you, you eat it. Don't be too fussy that I only eat this kind of food, or I'm abandoning this kind of food, or I don't like even this kind of. We have traditions where if one's wife puts food before you and one groans, they're a munafiq. Not a munafiq in the Sharia sense, a munafiq in the tariqa sense. And that is because you say La ilaha illallah, but in action, your tawheed in action is not La ilaha illallah. Yes, from a Sharia point of view, you say La ilaha illallah and you're a believer. You're a Muslim, okay. By saying there's no deity but Allah. There's no God but Allah. But in reality, no. And what you're doing is not haram, but from a tariqa point of view, it is haram, and therefore you're a munafiq. Because you're La ilaha illallah, you tell the people, in action, you don't practice it. What is the husband not practicing when he groans of the food put before him by the wife? Because the wife has given the food. Allah has given you that food in reality. Allah is the giver there, not the wife independently. And then when something is given before you, why do you reject it? When Allah is giving His sustenance to you, why do you reject it? You see? You're rejecting that sustenance. You're rejecting Tawheed in action in being incorporated within you by means of groaning. Otherwise, if you truly believe that all actions stem from Allah, when something happens and it's a halal thing, there's no place for groaning. This is your sustenance from Allah. Allah is the giver. Even if you don't like it, you consume it with this intention, that Allah has given it to me. Rather than groaning and saying, I want something else. This I want something else is compromising your tawheed in action. In Islam, on the tablecloth, in many aspects, it wants tawheed in action to be enhanced. Whatever is given before you consume, and also we have it in the Sharia. It's makruh to stretch your hands on that side of the tablecloth to take a food. When there's food before you, near you, it's makruh to stretch your arms to get food which is on that side of the table. For example, you go to someone's house and the host lays the tablecloth. There are a number of foods. It's mustahab just to take the foods near you. Why? This is a form of enhancing tawheed in action. Allah has given that. I submit to it completely. But when you stretch your arms for something, it's as if you're compromising your tawheed in action. Why? You have food before you. Why don't you suffice with that? What's the purpose of going and getting something which is not before you? See, it wants you to practice this. On the tablecloth, it's a grounds of practicing, incorporating tawheed in action. Don't stretch over. Don't look at people's mouths when they're eating. Just keep your head down and eat for yourself. Don't speak too much, although not speaking at all may be problematic, but don't speak too much. Because when you speak too much, when you're eating, you may not be recalling the giver of the food, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The tablecloth is, an educational, a pedagogical tool of incorporating Tawhid with all its different, the do's and don'ts and the rationale behind them. So here, yes, one shouldn't groan when the food is given, and just take what is there before you. The Holy Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yes, he would consume simple foods, and whatever was given there, he would consume. Now, yes, there were some foods that he would not consume, like foods that are harmful, foods that have unpleasant odors, for example. But there's a reason, there's a divine reason. Harmful food does harm to your body, you may not be able to do ibadat. Food that is with an unpleasant odor may be problematic for someone who wants to go to the mosque and speak with the people and deals with the people day in, day out. Or for example, when hot food was given, he would allow it to cool down. He wouldn't have the hot food whilst it was hot, for example. But everything he would eat. But he wouldn't overeat, but whatever food was there, he would eat all kinds of foods. This simplicity of eating no matter what. Halal food is someone who has that attribute, and you see it, you see that, yes, that their Tawhid in action will become stronger and stronger. In relation to the different types of food that one can consume, there's one hadith, tradition that we have from the Holy Messenger, where we can extrapolate a principle from it. And in this hadith, the Holy Messenger would drink a certain drink, and then at the same time, on the same tablecloth, he was offered another drink. The second drink was milk with honey. The first drink I can't remember, maybe water, but I can't remember what it was. But he would be offered a second drink. So let's say, for example, first it was water, the second was milk. He refused to take the second drink, and he said, "I'll refuse, but I won't prohibit it." But he wouldn't refuse. He wouldn't, tell the people not to have two different drinks at the same time on the same tablecloth. But he himself, he refused. Then the question is, so why would he refuse? Then the tradition continues with this clause, and it's this clause which is important. He said, وَلَكِنْ أَتَوَاضَعُ لِلَّهِ فَإِنَّ مَنْ تَوَاضَعَ لِلَّهِ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ تَكَبَّرَ خَفَضَهُ اللَّهُ. The question of tawadu and takabbur is mentioned. When explaining why he refused a second drink, the question of humility and arrogance arose. That when you suffice with one drink, it's a sign of humility. When you don't and you want more and more unnecessarily, it's a sign of arrogance. Now, 1400 years ago, this was an application of humility and arrogance. I'm not saying today maybe this may not apply. Today we may think of other examples of how having different forms of food can lead to an absence of humility. Now, I don't want to give too many examples, because usually when I go into particularities, I may be wrong. So I'll give one or two examples, but don't stick to these examples. These examples may not qualify in relation to where you are, what your culture, your customs are in the West, in the East, or whatever. But for example, there are these self-service restaurants. There are 40 foods there, and you pay a given amount, and you can eat whichever food, however much you want. This custom, it's not very spiritually friendly, because it's inciting you to eat a lot, because you've given a large amount of money, and then you're told you can eat whatever you want, however much you want. So you would be incited to eat a lot. That's one problem with overeating. And secondly, were you to go there and you have one kind of food, that's okay. But if you go there and eat 10 different kinds of food, okay, would this qualify as a sign of arrogance? Maybe, maybe, maybe not. I don't want to give an answer here. Are certain brands of food a sign of you being part of an elite or aristocracy? That you're eating this kind of food? If yes, it's problematic, according to this clause of the Holy Messenger. Because it's against that tawadu and humility that you're supposed to have. You're branding yourself as part of an elite. Why? Because of food. These things one has to, after you establish what the spirit of the law is, what the principle, the ratio legis is, one has to make an effort here. But in relation to the particularities, everyone for themselves. Don't let anyone decide for you. And you shouldn't go and preach to others. I'm giving you the general principles. The specific applications, everyone in their own country, in their own community, own culture, they may find different interpretations. And so one person may find X kind of eating unproblematic spiritually, whilst another may find it problematic. It's okay. There are a vast number of traditions where the Ahlul Bayt have ordered us not to fill the stomach too much, and they've described the container of the stomach being the worst container that can be filled. What is it that is spiritually unfriendly with eating or filling the stomach? What exactly is this? Why is it recommended to sleep with an empty stomach? See, these are linked with one another. Even dreams that follow the sleep after filling the stomach, they're not regarded as legitimate or standard interpretation-wise, compared to the dreams that you have towards the Fajr time, where now the food that you've ate has now been digested to some degree, and now you're dreaming. See? Here, the ulama have said that when the stomach is full, the soul is preoccupied. Not with the worldly things, which is also detrimental, but what is it preoccupied? The soul's preoccupation in other than Allah is detrimental in any case. But what is it here that the soul is being preoccupied with? Because one is, for example, they've had a lot to eat and now they're sleeping. This digesting of the food is the function of the soul. The soul is digesting it. Otherwise, a body with no soul, and you put food in the body, is it digesting anything? No. It's only when it has a soul, digestion of the body happens. This is one of the functions. All actions are actions of the soul. When you're seeing, this physical eye isn't seeing. The soul is seeing. The eye is just an instrument. That's why after death, the eye doesn't see anything. It's only when one is alive that there's unity between the body and soul. Once one is dead, there's no unity between body and soul. If you cut your eye, you cut your hand, and the hand or your eye is detached from the body, but you're still alive, that eye and that hand is no longer a part of you. There's no unity anymore. It's only when you're alive that unity between body and soul arises. Here, the soul is now over-occupied with digesting the food. When it's over-occupied with digesting the food, it's not free to transcend spiritually. It's not detached from these things. It's attached to this realm of digesting. So it won't allow you to transcend positively. There may be some transition, because when you sleep, you automatically do detach from the physical realm. But now you've overeaten, that overeating, or overeaten rather, now you've overeaten, this overeating has led to the soul being preoccupied. And now it's preoccupied, it won't allow it to spiritually elevate or benefit. And so, the lesser the stomach is filled, the more you can spiritually ascend. Or, as some poems go from Ayatollah Hasanzadeh, the more physical food you do not put down yourself, put down your throat, the lesser that is, the more spiritual food you will be given. And this is a principle we have. So this we see clearly in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. And there are many prescriptions to this, the most important being when you're eating, before becoming fully satiated, stop, before becoming full. Or never start eating when you're not hungry. These are absolute truths to eating. These truths apply in a very important way, and they've been prescribed from Amir al-Mu'mineen. They're part of a list of do's and don'ts which Amir al-Mu'mineen had said, if you abide by this, you'd never need to go to a doctor in your life. Okay. There are many prescriptions of how to eat. Imam Rida has given many prescriptions to different people. That may not be very wise to share or practice if you read them, because those prescriptions may be specific to those people. But the overall good principle which can be extrapolated from the Quran is to have 2 meals a day, one in the morning and one at night. Now, if you do have 3 meals and one in midday, it's okay. I'm not saying it's haram. But beware that this overeating doesn't result from having 3 meals a day. And whether you have 2 or 3 meals a day, it's good to have it with discipline. Don't have, let's say, lunch at 12 o'clock one day, then 1 o'clock another day, and 2 o'clock the next day, you miss it the 4th day, then you have 5 o'clock lunch another day. This is not disciplining the soul. This is letting the soul go loose. You're letting it loose. In order to spiritually elevate, you need a disciplined soul, not a soul that is drowned in one's animalistic attributes. Animals eat whenever they want. They have lunch at 2 o'clock one day, 3 o'clock the other day. There's no time for animals. They don't live off a kind of a time frame. They don't discipline the soul. But humans, yes, you can discipline the soul. The late Imam Khomeini, they once brought his lunch. He would have it 1 hour after Salatul Dhuhr. They would bring it, this was in his later years, they would bring it 5 minutes earlier. And he said, bring it in 5 minutes' time. See, that much of discipline. He had reached that level of disciplining himself. But these snacks and coffee that we have on multiple occasions during the day, whenever we want, this is problematic. No one is saying have no snacks, but even snacks, control it. Control. Don't have it whenever you want. Don't have the coffee just because you feel like it or you're a bit hungry. Try to limit when you eat. Discipline the timing. Because animals don't. So the more you do discipline the timing, the more you eat less like an animal. But the less you discipline and you eat whenever you want, the more you're eating like an animal. Those animalistic attributes become incorporated. Your spiritual elevation, your Tawhid, the rate of your Tawhid being incorporated with you is going to be compromised. Or for example, in Islam, it advises one to eat in small morsels. Why? because animals eat in large morsels. But you're a human. You eat in small morsels. Eat slowly, for example. Why? Why is it mustahab to eat slowly? Because animals eat fast. And if you eat fast, at a fast rate, you're incorporating animalistic tendencies. If you eat slow, at a slow rate, in small morsels, you're taming the animal dimension within. And that's good. Also, it's mustahab to eat, collectively with people. Not to, consume alone. When you could just compare yourself when you eat alone and when you eat in front of others. It's not the same. Here we have the Ibrahimi model, alayhi salam, where here Ibrahim alayhi salam taught us he would never eat alone. He had reached that level where he would refrain maximally from having his meal all by himself. And here there were many reasons why. This was one of them, where you tamed the animal dimension. But for them, for prophets, other dimensions enter the picture. And that is that this physical food, when you're a host to physical food, and when you host someone, the rationale behind hosting someone is to give them spiritual food. It's only a conduit to giving spiritual food to the person. When you host someone to a party for the sake of the physical food, you've lost the plot. And here, one is losing out, wasting one's time. There's one story where he would search for kilometers before you found a caravan passing, and they were mushrik. They weren't even believers. And he would invite believers to his house. And look at the openness here. There's no prejudice, that compassion to all people. And when he was inviting these non-believers, he would give them food and be a proper host. See them as Allah's creatures. And whilst giving the physical food, he would preach them the spiritual food. Then giving them this spiritual food has its effect. And in the tradition, those people became Muslim. They became believers. Why? Because through the spiritual food which Nabi Ibrahim would give them. And this is the Ibrahimi model. And it's not without its spiritual benefits. We have to try and incorporate these. Without it leading to our complacency, our arrogance, or posing in front of others, try to incorporate these adab, these etiquettes of eating that is in the Sharia. But as you're doing it, don't tell people, I'm doing it because the Sharia says this. Because here you're boasting. There may be some riyah. It's possible. I'm not saying everyone is like that. Sometimes you preach out of true sincerity. But you think of yourself. Try to incorporate these truly within yourself. These are all mustahab actions. These are actions of the tariqah. It's not as if the other person is doing something wrong. You focus on yourself. That's why, for example, ambiguous food, even though the Sharia may say it's permissible to consume in certain cases, why is it better not to consume? Because you're saying, oh Allah, because of you, although it's permissible to consume, but this may not be halal. For example, someone gives you a drink and they say there may be some alcohol in it. But you're told that there's no alcohol and you have certainty there's no alcohol in it. But now someone has said it has alcohol and it's compromised your certainty a bit. From a Sharia's point of view, you're still allowed to consume it until it's substantiated that there's alcohol in it. A mere doubt is not enough. But you refrain from consuming that drink because it's ambiguous now for you. It's a shubha. And this is very good. It's a strong degree of taqwa. The reason why it's good, because you're saying, oh Allah, for your sake, I'm not ready for you to contaminate myself, even though it's only a threat. I don't know 100%, but I'm not ready. This intention is holy. The intention is holy. With this intention, you're purifying yourself. You're saying, because of, oh Allah, because of that closeness with you, I want to be close with you. And this may be contaminating. And it won't contaminate me spiritually, even were I to eat it. And it was then shown to be alcohol, because I never intended it. But since there's a risk, for you, I don't want to eat it. This intention is holy. Even though if you had drank it and it was then shown to be alcohol, it wouldn't corrupt you. It wouldn't be a spiritual disadvantage to you. I mean, don't say that, well, if someone drinks alcohol, or someone has poison, even if they don't know it's poison and they drink it, the poison will have its effect on the body. Don't analogize, make that analogy. There's no qiyas in these rulings. We don't have qiyas in Islam. You can't just find an example and say that's like that. Here, spirituality, don't give an analogy to something in the medical realm. Spirituality is a function of one's intentions. So you never had the intention of drinking alcohol. And therefore, when you drink alcohol, it won't be spiritually reversing. It won't be. It won't be a disadvantage. What may be a disadvantage is this, is if you keep on drinking it, when you know there's a threat, but Sharia-wise, you're allowed to drink it because it's not substantiated. And then it becomes a habit, you drinking that kind. Here, this habit of yours can be spiritually disadvantageous. Because now for you, you've acquired a habit of what? A habit of, it doesn't matter. Let's say even if it's haram. It's still allowed from a Sharia's point of view. It doesn't matter if it's haram. We didn't know. That should not be incorporated within. And that does arise when you make it a habit of consuming or having such foods. Yes. Another issue is the reciting Allah's name. In some traditions it says at the beginning of the meal, at the end of the meal. In some traditions, with every different type of food you have at the meal. So if you have rice with stew and salad and yogurt, with each one, for example, say Bismillah, at least in the beginning. If you remember at the end also, so much the better. This reciting Allah's name, yes, it's just a kind of recalling Allah, and that is beneficial for the soul. Because you're recalling Allah. Don't have a meal from beginning to end without recalling Allah at all. Then the issue of reciting a dua at the end of the meal. And that's also musta'ab, but this I've heard from many important scholars, and since I've heard it, I think, well, from one particular scholar, and since I want you to benefit from this advice, if possible, because this can be contaminating to the soul. This particular scholar, when he was asked to recite a dua at the end of the meal, when everyone finished their meal, he refrained. He said there's no need. And when he was asked the reason later on, he said, I don't do it when I'm alone. So I didn't want a riyah to arise within me, that I'm doing it now people have asked me, for the people. He would, when he was alone, he would say, Alhamdulillah, but now people are asking him, he now gives the whole dua. These things, one has to be careful of, that one shouldn't have that, that hypocrite standard. Once or twice it's okay, but when it becomes a pattern of hypocrisy, that hypocrisy slowly becomes incorporated within you. Yes. The manner of sitting also shouldn't be a way of sitting that can be classified as arrogance. Sitting on a table maybe 1400 years ago was an example of arrogance compared to when the norm was sitting on the floor. Today, sitting on a table does not qualify as arrogance in most societies and countries. But that you may think of other examples of where the table setup can be a setup which is, aristocratic or part of an elite, or it stands out in a way which can lead you, when people see you, can lead for that arrogance to arise. It's possible. And if that's the case, it can be spiritually detrimental. But sitting in general, though, even today, sitting on the floor does enhance that humility. And since it does, it's good. We shouldn't make it go extinct. The purpose is humility wants to be ingrained within you. If sitting has that, so much the better. Yes, okay. Right, I think that is most of the adab which I wanted to cover in eating has been covered. And as I say, amongst all these adab, some of them was to tame the animal dimension, some of them was to enhance the humility dimension of the human being and get rid of any traces of the ego or arrogance entering one. And these are things which can change over time, but the principles stand always until the end of time. And some of them are actual Tawhid entering one, Tawhid in action, recalling of that oneness of Allah in action or in attributes, actually benefiting in that way through eating. And Ibn Arabi is spoken about even why you should take an odd number of sips of water. Although that's what is in one of his testaments, that has to be explained, all of it. I can't just give you a one-line answer. But in his testaments, he even explains and tries to prove this. And what is it? What kind of oneness is it when the number of morsels or the number of sips of water you take, it's an odd number which is recommended. I mean, we have other traditions where when you drink water, don't drink in one gulp without taking rests in between. And even in between those rests, there are certain invocations to recite, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, or recall certain holy figures in Islam. However, that's different, because when you drink very fast or in one gulp, that animalistic tendency will be incorporated. But this odd number, these things are important. Or something else which came to mind, why is drinking water recommended during the day for you to be standing, but at night it's recommended for you to be sitting? People, again, they look for medical reasons. But here, the Sharia wants it to be a difference between you and animals. With animals, it doesn't make a difference whether it's night or day, how they drink. They're an animal. But when you make that difference, it does help you to appreciate or acknowledge that there's a difference here, first of all. I'm drinking as Allah has prescribed for me to drink, and it matters when I'm drinking, how I drink. See, when one becomes aware of this in itself helps in the way one executes one's diet. It helps one at least to refrain from animalistic tendencies being incorporated within one. And as I say, one can go on for a long period of time. For example, even the tablecloth, it's mustahab to be of a certain type. In those days, they would travel with a certain cloth. And then that cloth, it was mustahab to eat on that cloth when they're at home, for example, not traveling. And there, the wisdom was that it wants you to recall the journey to resurrection. It wants you to recall resurrection, the journey that you're going to have in this world, to Qiyamah. By eating on such a garment, such a cloth, which is used for traveling, you are now recalling when eating that you're a traveler. A traveler to who? to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this will help you then to remember even the food is from Allah, you're doing it for a divine purpose, and so on and so forth. Okay, I think I'll stop there. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.